A federal judge had blocked the Biden administration's immigration enforcement priorities that directed border agents to focus on those with serious criminal records. The Biden administration, in 2 memos, directed U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents to focus on those deemed a threat to public safety. But following a challenge from Texas and Missouri, a U.S. District Court judge in Texas ruled that border agents should be able to pursue migrants in, quote, overlooked categories. In a brief that begins by quoting a 1996 Senate Judiciary Committee report noting the need to enforce immigration laws, Judge Drew Tipton argues that agents cannot be required to prioritize some groups of undocumented individuals over others.
A U-Haul truck was stopped by Refugio County Sheriff's deputies. Inside, 34 migrants begging for help. The Sheriff's Office received 2 911 calls about the truck while it was at a gas station. Now, the callers said that they could hear cries for help and banging on the sides of the truck. Turns out the group was made up of people of various ages, including some minors. The driver of the truck was arrested, and the people inside were said to be dehydrated and suffering from the heat due to the high temperatures and no ventilation.
It has been a record-breaking year when it comes to border crossings. More than 1 million migrants caught along our southern border. More than 2/3 of those apprehensions were right here in Texas.
And tonight, KPRC2 investigator Robert Arnold is back along the southern border. He's talking with health officials and lawmakers to find out just how migrant crossings are having an impact on the rising number of COVID cases.
Nos sentíamos perseguidos, más que todo por eso. Porque fuimos afectados por los huracanes. Por los huracanes tuvo nosotros. Ella quedó desempleada.
The reasons for coming haven't changed. Last time we spoke, you said you were averaging about 1,000 encounters a day.
Right now, for the last few weeks, it's been over 2,000, 2,300 apprehensions per day.
And the #1 spot for apprehensions on the entire border is the Rio Grande Valley, an area also struggling with the weight of the pandemic.
Because of the limited resources, there's a possibility of pitting a resident versus the migrant.
How much of an impact is the border having on Hidalgo County in terms of COVID?
Excellent question. I think it's been misrepresented.
Dr. Ivan Melendez is the health authority for Hidalgo County.
It is impossible to have more people in one place and not be an impact.
He says out of the more than 94,000 migrants tested this year, 8.4% are positive. In the last few weeks, that number has climbed to 14%.
Absolutely, the migrants play a part of it, but they're not the cause. If the migrants were not coming, we would still have a pandemic. We would still have a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
The impact is on resources.
As public officials, we got to take care of our residents first.
Laredo Congressman Henry Cuellar says local leaders are angry. The federal government left the testing and quarantining of asylum-seeking migrants released from Border Patrol custody up to them.
We need real solutions to what is happening here.
Nonprofits are filling some of the gaps.
COVID positives, which is my biggest concern. We want to make sure they don't enter any location until they're negative.
Sister Norma Pimentel is head of Catholic Charities in the Rio Grande Valley and oversees the testing of migrants. At first, Border Patrol was releasing migrants in McAllen for testing, and the church was quarantining positive cases in hotels. But the numbers started overwhelming the operation.
We were not able to empty hotels as fast as we were getting them, so we were at a point that we could not hold any more positives.
To try to better control the potential spread of COVID, the city of McAllen, Hidalgo County, and Catholic Charities made a change in where Border Patrol is releasing immigrants from custody. The entire operation had to be moved to nearby Anzalduas Park on the banks of the Rio Grande.
Cups, spoons, okay, and got ice cold milk for them.
Volunteer Jonathan Selby was taking supplies to the park, and he shot this video for us since the public is not allowed inside. Now, all migrants released in this area are brought to the park for testing, and those who are positive remain here under quarantine in air-conditioned tents. McAllen officials say while the cost is ongoing, so far a FEMA grant covered $1.5 million for testing. Catholic Charities is shouldering other costs.
The reason that we have Anzalduas Park and over 2,000 people in Anzalduas Park is because the federal government doesn't have any place for us to take them.
But not every spot on the border has a setup like this. Laredo Mayor Pete Sines says his city can't do what McAllen is doing.
We don't have the infrastructure to test, quarantine, so we don't test these folks.
This is why Cuellar and several border leaders are asking the federal government to pause the release of asylum-seeking migrants, at least until they can get out from under a pandemic that continues to take a toll.
We have to prioritize our local residents that are here.
Reporting from the Rio Grande Valley, Robert Arnold, KPRC 2 News.
In what has been a new surge of asylum seekers, the city of San Antonio says nearly 30,000 migrants have now passed through San Antonio since April. They were loaded up on buses on the border after being processed and then sent along their way to destinations all around the U.S.
As Garrett Berger explains, one councilman's concerns about what they could be bringing with them, bringing some sharp rebukes from colleagues.
With hundreds of migrants passing through the San Antonio airport every day, District 10 Councilman Clayton Perry lamented today that they aren't required to be tested for COVID-19.
I don't understand why the federal government isn't doing it, number one, but if they're not doing it, why can't we do that to make sure that we're not continuing to spread this disease across the country?
Perry's comments came as the council discussed a contract with Catholic Charities to help care for migrants who come through the airport. City staff say most of the migrants move on quickly, maybe staying one night before flying out. And they have the same rights as other airport customers and cannot be forced to take a test.
And a lot of our nonprofits are testing those individuals. And so we feel that a majority of them coming are tested, but there are no testing mandates.
And some of Perry's fellow council members took offense to his line of questioning.
I believe that calling this item out for discussion is calling it out because the people who are receiving these services are people of color and because they have a different national origin than some of the people sitting on this dais.
The rhetoric characterizing immigrants, migrants, or refugees as disease or virus carriers is very dangerous.
Well, Councilman McKee Rodriguez pointed out there's a danger to the migrants passing through San Antonio, too.
It's not people bringing in diseases here. We have the disease. We have the virus here.
Perry denied his concerns had anything to do with race and ultimately joined the rest of the council in passing the contract. Garrett Berger, KSAT 12 News.
The Border Patrol has a new chief, Raul Ortiz. He grew up in Del Rio and still has family there.
He's been working on the border for 30 years and says what's going on there affects everyone. KENS 5 border reporter Anastasia Bolton had a few minutes to talk to Ortiz when he recently visited the Rio Grande Valley.
This isn't just a border problem. This is a national security issue.
You're 30 years on the job. You see things. And then in July, your agency hits the busiest month in 21 years.
I will tell you that the men and women of the Border Patrol, our resources are stretched awfully thin.
And there's a new disease, and then a variant of it.
It certainly made the situation more complicated and complex.
Chief Raul Ortiz is U.S. Border Patrol's new man in charge.
And we continue to find ourselves dealing with a population that's much different than I've experienced throughout my career. We have family units, unaccompanied children. We have folks from, 140 different countries.
Local government leaders in the Rio Grande Valley and Laredo have been criticizing the feds for how they've been handling the influx of people. and the fact that locals like Catholic Charities in McAllen and the city have had to figure out COVID quarantine for migrants released by Border Patrol.
We're doing something that we're not equipped to do, that we're not supposed to do, and that we shouldn't be doing.
We've been complaining, and people supposedly have been listening for some time, but we need a solution to shut that valve until such time as we have a plan in place. Washington put a plan in place.
Ortiz says he and his boss, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, hear them.
What we have done is put them in close coordination with our FEMA partners, because there is grant funding that exists for these local communities so they can get some reimbursement, so they're not having to absorb all the costs associated, whether with its testing or quarantining or putting them in some sort of segregated facility. So I'm confident that we're going to make some inroads on that.
How fast can or will the government bureaucracy work? As cliche as it is, all of us will have a front row seat to it as we watch what happens not only on the border, but across the country.
This affects Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, and ultimately where I live right now in Washington, D.C. And so this has to be a whole of government approach. I can't stress that enough.
In Brownsville with Jose Sanchez, I'm Anastasia Bolton.
And in continuation with our U.S.-Mexico border coverage, U.S. Border Patrol released this photo early morning over their Twitter and Facebook pages, announcing an apprehension of more than 380 undocumented individuals overnight. Agents also mentioned that the people apprehended included a large group of 49, 81, and 58.
The Border Patrol of Del Rio covers more than 200 miles of territory, reaching 55 miles into the interior of Texas.
They're second only to their colleagues in the Rio Grande Valley, where officers are the busiest in the nation handling migrant activity. Officials say they only have a fraction of the manpower needed to deal with an average of over 1,000 migrant encounters a day.
Vanessa Croy with the KENS 5 border team explains how agents are handling the increase.
At least half of those migrant encounters, up to 500 a day, are all happening in Val Verde County. Hundreds of migrants waiting to turn themselves in. But the challenge for agents is processing centers are over capacity and transportation is limited.
It's the hotspot for migrant crossings in Del Rio, a restricted area near the Port of Entry Bridge, only accessible with Border Patrol escort. Officials said they're seeing many groups like this one, gathering at the gate, waiting to turn themselves in to authorities.
Cunha is relatively safe compared to Rio Grande Valley, where they have two cartels fighting for territory. There's only one cartel south of us.
But it's creating a bottleneck. Processing centers are already full.
400 to 500 migrants a day that we're trying to hold, care, feed, process, and then trying to move them out as quick as possible.
And with most agents pulled from the field for processing, transportation is also limited.
Just because of the flow and the congestion at all the stations, it doesn't allow us to move them quicker,
leaving the migrants to wait out the time in the blazing summer heat. And that's why Border Patrol has created a temporary intake station under the Port of Entry Bridge, where the shade provides a cooler space to wait.
If you compare it to where they were to what it is now, 100 times better. We brought them water, we brought them porta potties. We also have a non-governmental organization that provides them with food.
Patrol agent in charge of the Del Rio station, Rick Moreno, said the migrants crossing here are mostly from Haiti, Cuba, and Venezuela. And with the high numbers, COVID is still a major concern.
That's in our mind every day, so we treat every migrant as a potential exposure.
He said agents don't have the capability to test migrants for COVID at the processing facilities.
We take every single precaution, understanding that the threat is still there, and we message it every single day.
In Del Rio with the KENS 5 border team, I'm Vanessa Croy.